They say the worst betrayals are carved with family hands. Mine came with the sharp sting of skin meeting skin, the echo of a slap in a place built for sparkle. In the middle of Alouette's fine jewelry, among trays of diamonds and delicate rose gold, my sister's palm struck my cheek, and the woman who once braided my hair hissed one word like it was venom. Shadow. The irony wasn't lost on me. Surrounded by gemstones catching every light, she still couldn't see me. Not really. I'd spent years dimming myself so she could shine. But that day, I wore my worth like a tailored coat. I hadn't planned to be seen. I came to browse, maybe to buy a gift, something discreet yet beautiful, to celebrate the quiet milestones I never announced. The staff greeted me like royalty. "Welcome back, Mrs. Whitmore," one of them said. "Your preferred collection just arrived." The woman with the clipboard and sleek bun led me past the velvet ropes. Not because of who I came with, because of who I had become. The transformation was years in the making. "My name is Eliza Monroe, formerly Eliza Nothing Special, forever secondborn to the Radiant, entitled Juliana." She was always the star. I was the afterthought, the backup singer, the understudy never called to the stage. I used to wonder why I was invisible to the very people who were supposed to see me first. Maybe because I didn't scream for attention. I listened. I observed. I stayed quiet when Juliana took credit for my ideas or wore my clothes without asking. I nodded and smiled through her jabs masked as jokes. I played my part. Until I met Roman. But I'll get to him later. Right now, we're in the jewelry store. Juliana stormed in uninvited, her heels clacking like accusations against marble floors. "What the hell are you doing here?" she demanded, her eyes sweeping over my custom silk dress, the way the manager poured champagne into a crystal flute just for me. "I was invited," I said simply, turning a bracelet over in my hand. "Invited? What, did they mistake you for someone important?" I said nothing. I didn't need to. My silence, in that moment, was a mirror. And Juliana hated what she saw reflected back. She snapped. The slap came so fast I barely saw her arm move. My skin burned, not just from the impact, but from years of swallowed pain erupting through that single gesture. And then it happened. The doors opened behind her. The hush that followed was instant. Heads turned. The manager straightened her blazer, employees froze mid-step. A man walked in, calm as dusk, dangerous as midnight. Roman. 6'3", dark suit, darker eyes. The man who loved me not because I needed him, but because I didn't. The man who saw me when I was still learning to see myself. His voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Touch my wife again, and see." Juliana froze. Her mouth hung open, all her practiced lines suddenly stolen by fear. Her eyes flicked from him to me, registering for the first time that I was not alone. That I was not powerless. I wish I could say I felt triumphant. I didn't. Not yet. I felt hollow. Because in that moment, I realized something. The most painful part wasn't the slap. It was that it took another's protection for my sister to finally stop hurting me. But this story isn't just about pain. It's about what came next. It's about the fire I lit with my own hands. My cheeks still tingled as Roman stepped between us. He didn't touch Juliana. He didn't need to. His presence alone was a wall she couldn't scale. The staff scrambled, one of them gently offered me a cool cloth, another whispered, "Shall we escort her out?" But Roman held up a hand, calm as ever. "Let her speak," he said. His voice was silk wrapped around steel. Juliana blinked like she'd just woken from a dream. You're married?" She said it like it was a betrayal. Like I'd committed a sin by loving and being loved. Her eyes darted to the discreet platinum band on my finger, the one I never flaunted. Unlike her, I didn't need a billboard to prove I mattered. "Yes," I said, wiping the corner of my mouth. "For a year now." "A year," she whispered. "You didn't tell anyone." "No one asked." She flinched at that. The truth has a way of bruising without force. And the truth was, Juliana had only ever looked at me to make sure she looked better. Roman stepped closer to me, his fingers brushing mine in silent comfort. I knew what he was doing, offering support without making me small. He always had that gift. Juliana's gaze flicked to him, calculating. You're him, aren't you? Her voice cracked on the realization. Roman Whitmore. The Whitmore Group. He nodded once. His expression didn't shift. But I saw the flicker in his eyes, the protective flame always lit for me. Juliana's mask of confidence slipped, revealing the fear beneath. Because my sister, for all her poise and performance, lived on borrowed power. She'd never built anything herself. She only knew how to take. And suddenly, she realized she couldn't take this. I watched her deflate, her shoulders sagging under the weight of her own pride. But how? How what? I asked, almost gently. How did you get this life? The attention? Him. There it was. The truth she couldn't dress up. She believed I wasn't worthy. And once I believed that too. You called me Shadow, I said, the words slow and careful. But you never asked why I stayed quiet all those years. You assumed it was weakness. Her jaw tightened. I stayed quiet, I continued, because I thought that was the only way to be loved by you. By any of you. If I was smaller, maybe you'd let me in. But shrinking doesn't earn you love, it just makes you invisible. Roman's hand tightened around mine. I took a breath, steady and full. But here's what I've learned. I don't need to be seen by everyone. I just needed to be seen by someone who knew my name. Roman turned to the manager. We'll take the bracelet. The one she was admiring before she was interrupted. Of course, Mr. Whitmore. As we walked to the counter, Juliana still stood frozen, her fury flickering into something sadder. A hollow princess in a store full of crowns. I didn't turn back. I didn't need to. The girl who used to chase crumbs had finally found her feast. And the shadow? She had stepped into the light. The car ride home was quiet, not because there was nothing to say, but because everything had already been said. Roman drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on my thigh, a silent vow as steady as his heartbeat. Outside, the city blurred into gold and gray, a twilight wash of luxury and memory. I watched the world pass through tinted windows and thought about shadows, not the ones that trail behind you, but the ones that live inside the hearts of others. Juliana didn't create mine. She merely confirmed it. It's strange how the deepest scars never break skin. Roman glanced at me. Are you all right? I smiled faintly. She's called me that for years. Shadow. As if I were a specter clinging to her light. You were never in her shadow, he said. She just never knew how to stand beside you. I turned to him. How did you know I needed saving back there? His mouth lifted slightly. Because I know the silence you wear when you're about to break. That made my throat tighten. He always noticed. From the beginning. I first met Roman at a charity event I almost didn't attend. I was helping organize the silent auction, folding programs in the corner while socialites clinked champagne and smiled with teeth too white to be true. Juliana was the star that night too, of course, on the arm of a CEO's son, parading her laughter like it was perfume. Roman had approached me without pretense. Is that the list for the auction? I looked up surprised. Yes. You left your own name off. I blinked. Excuse me. He pointed to the program. Everyone who helped put this together is listed, except you. My breath caught. I hadn't realized. No one had noticed. No one ever did. Except him. From that moment on, he peeled back every layer of quiet I'd wrapped around myself. Not with force, but with presence. With care. Like unwrapping a fragile gift no one had ever bothered to open. Now, months later, he was still doing it, protecting, yes, but more than that, witnessing. We pulled into the driveway of our home, a modern craftsman with ivy climbing its trellis, a place that didn't need to scream wealth because it was built with intention. With love. Inside, the lights glowed warmly. My sanctuary. Roman poured us each a glass of wine, setting mine on the table before disappearing into the back room. When he returned, he held something behind his back. Close your eyes, he said. I did. A moment later, something cool and familiar brushed my wrist. Open. I looked down. The bracelet. The one from the store. Not in a velvet bag. Not in a box. But on me. It's yours, he said simply. Because you didn't need it to prove anything. But I needed you to have something that reminded you were seen. Every day. Especially by me. Tears welled. Not from sadness, but from the unraveling of years of being unseen. Thank you, I whispered. For what? He asked, brushing a strand of hair from my face. For never making me smaller to feel big. That night, I sat in our garden, the bracelet catching moonlight on my wrist, and I thought about the word shadow again. How funny that she used it as an insult. But shadows don't exist without light. And sometimes, the quiet ones are the ones who carry the sun. 3 days passed. 3 days since the jewelry store. Since the slap. Since Roman's voice sliced through my sister's delusion like a cold blade. I thought that would be the end of it. That she would retreat into silence or shame. But shame was never something Juliana wore easily. She preferred defiance, wrapped in pearls and polished smiles. So when she showed up at my door unannounced, I wasn't surprised. Disappointed? Yes. But surprised? Never. She stood there in her designer trench, holding a pale pink pastry box like a peace offering. I brought those lemon tarts you love, she said. The same ones she once told her friends I only liked because I had the taste of a grandmother. That memory came uninvited, like a splinter under the skin. I didn't move to take the box. Juliana, why are you here? She shifted, eyes flicking past me into the home she'd never stepped foot in. Can't a sister visit without needing a reason? That made me laugh. Dry. Flat. We both know that's not how this works. A pause. Then, the drop of her mask, just for a second. You embarrassed me. There it was. Not an apology. Not regret. Just wounded pride. You embarrassed yourself, I replied calmly. I just stopped shielding you from the consequences. Her hand tightened on the box. You think you're better than me now? Because you married a billionaire and bought yourself a voice. No, Juliana, I said, stepping aside and gesturing toward the living room. I found my voice long before him. Roman just happened to listen. She hesitated, then entered. Her heels clicked across the marble, too loud for a house built for peace. She sat on the edge of the cream velvet chair like it might bite her. We made tea. Earl Grey, steeped 5 minutes, the way she used to like it. As I poured, she watched me with eyes full of questions, but too proud to ask. I came to talk, she said, finally. I shouldn't have hit you. That wasn't an apology either, but it was something. Why did you? I asked, setting her cup down gently. She stared into the steam. Because they were treating you like me. Like the special one. And I couldn't stand it. That truth landed like lead in my chest. You were always the special one, I said, not bitterly, just factually. I was just the one no one worried about disappointing. Her fingers trembled slightly as she lifted her cup. I was jealous, she admitted. Still am. Not because of Roman. Not even the money. But because you seem free. I blinked. You don't try to impress anyone anymore, she continued. You just are. Silence stretched between us like a tightrope. You could be free too, you know, I said quietly. But not if you keep pretending you're not scared. That cracked something. A tiny fracture. Juliana looked up, and for the first time in years, I didn't see the rival. I saw the little girl who used to braid my hair and whisper stories in the dark. The one who held my hand during storms. The one I lost somewhere along the way. I don't know who I am without all of this, she whispered. Then maybe it's time you find out, I said. And we sat there. 2 women raised in a world where love was performance and worth was measured in applause. Drinking tea. With lemon tarts between us. And silence that, for once, didn't feel like a weapon. After Juliana left, the air in the house lingered with the scent of bergamot and broken pretenses. I stood by the window for a long while, watching her car shrink down the drive. There was no grand reconciliation. No tears or hugs. Just an uneasy ceasefire between 2 women raised on comparison instead of compassion. That night, I couldn't sleep. Memory stirred, restless and sharp. I found myself in the attic at midnight, dust in my hair and splinters in my palms, pulling down the old cedar box I hadn't opened in over a decade. Inside were pieces of the girl I used to be, journals, faded photographs, a crumpled dance recital program with Juliana's name bolded in gold, and mine scribbled in pencil at the bottom. One page in my old journal read, "If I shine too brightly, they won't love her. So I'll just glow in private." My throat closed. All my life, I had mistaken invisibility for kindness. Letting her take the spotlight. Letting others assume I was content to be quiet. I wasn't. I was just afraid of what would happen if I claimed space. Roman found me there, sitting cross-legged on the attic floor, surrounded by the debris of my younger self. He didn't ask questions. He simply sat beside me and picked up one of the photos. "This one's my favorite," he said. It was of me at 13, holding a ribbon from a regional science fair. Juliana stood beside me, arms crossed, clearly scowling. "Why?" I asked. "Because it's the only picture where you're proud of something no one else celebrated." I looked at him. "I'm sorry I didn't tell my family about us sooner," I confessed. Roman's brow furrowed. "You don't owe them anything." "No," I said, "but I owed myself the honesty of being seen." He nodded, understanding. Then reached into his jacket and handed me a letter. "It came this afternoon. From your father's attorney." My blood turned to ice. I opened it slowly. A formal letter. Legal letterhead. It read like a eulogy for a relationship that never quite lived. My father was stepping down from the family company, an empire he built, but one Juliana was set to inherit. Except, he'd changed the terms. Juliana was no longer the sole heir. It was now split evenly between us. I reread the line 3 times. I could almost hear my father's voice in the distance, cool, calculated, and strangely tired. He hadn't spoken to me in months. Not since I turned down the job he offered to give me purpose. This letter wasn't love. It was control, dressed as fairness. Roman read my expression and asked gently, "What will you do?" I folded the letter with care, the way I'd fold a flag after battle. "I don't want the ashes of something that burned me," I said. "Let Juliana have the throne. I'm building something that doesn't require crowns." Roman smiled. The attic light flickered once, then steadied. Like the house itself was exhaling with me. Downstairs, the clock struck 3. And for the first time in years, I didn't dread the morning. Morning crept in soft and golden, brushing against the curtains like a shy apology. I stood in the kitchen barefoot, watching the espresso drip into delicate porcelain cups Roman brought back from Milan. They were the kind of cups my mother would have called too nice to use, which meant we would have used them never. But in this house, everything beautiful was meant to be touched. Especially joy. As I sipped, the phone buzzed. "Mother." I let it ring twice before answering. There was a time I would have rushed to pick it up, eager for even crumbs of attention. But something had shifted in me. Something that had long bent finally straightened. "Eliza," she began, her tone clipped as ever. "Your father told me about the will update. So, that's why she called." I said nothing, letting the silence stretch like a blank canvas. "He was hoping it might bring you back into the fold," she continued. "This family needs unity." Unity. A word she used like perfume, to mask, never to cleanse. "Is that why you didn't come to the wedding?" I asked, not accusing, just curious. She paused. "We didn't receive an invitation." "You never asked if you were invited," I replied. "You assumed you weren't, or hoped you weren't." A brittle silence followed. "I saw Juliana," I continued, setting my cup down. "She's scared. She won't say it, but she is. Because for once, the ground beneath her isn't hers alone. She's under a lot of pressure," Mother said, always the diplomat for one daughter and the judge for the other. I laughed softly. "Do you even know what kind of pressure I lived under?" "Eliza, all those years I was quiet, it wasn't because I had nothing to say. It was because you only heard what you wanted." Silence. She finally spoke, voice softer. "I didn't know how to love you the way you needed." That landed like glass against stone, shattering something fragile in me. "I know," I whispered. Because it was the truth. She didn't know. And maybe she never would. But naming the ache helped soften it. Like calling out a ghost that's haunted you for decades. "I'm not coming back," I said. "Not to the business. Not to the stage you built around Juliana's crown." "What about the inheritance?" "I inherited enough from you," I said. Quiet. Shame. A hunger for approval that almost devoured me. And then, because I wasn't cruel, I added, "but I also inherited strength." a spine forged in silence. You gave me that too, even if by accident. She didn't respond. I hope you find peace, Mother. Then I hung up. Roman came into the kitchen as I slid the phone away. He raised a brow. She finally called, he asked. I nodded. We closed a chapter. He kissed the top of my head. What now? I turned to the window, where sunlight spilled across the garden like a benediction. Now, I said, we begin a story where I'm not an extra in someone else's drama. And the pages turned. It began with a seed. An idea that rooted itself one quiet afternoon as I trimmed the rose bushes in the back garden. I wasn't just pruning petals, I was preparing. Because healing, I'd learned, was an active thing. It didn't come in sleep or silence. It bloomed where you planted it. So, I started planting. Literally at first, herbs, wildflowers, lavender along the fence. Roman helped me build raised beds, hauling soil and timber in his crisp white shirt, laughing when I scolded him for ruining it. A garden, I told him, should begin in love. Not perfection. But then, something more began to grow. One evening, as the sky deepened into gold, I opened my inbox and saw the message. It was from a woman named Cassie Hartwell, the owner of a boutique event firm. She had read an article about Roman's latest philanthropic project, which mentioned me briefly, his wife, Eliza, an artist of intimate spaces and immersive design. Cassie wrote, I've seen your touch in the Whitmore Gala and the anniversary soiree last fall. They were felt. I don't usually reach out like this, but I believe your voice deserves its own space. Are you open to collaboration? I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering. That gala had been my doing. Every flower arrangement, every scent in the air, even the subtle lighting that made people linger longer near the donor tables, it was mine. But my name had been missing from the program. I hadn't minded then. But now? Now I wanted more. I wrote back a cautious yes. Then watched as one yes turned into 3. 3 turned into 5. Word spread, not through billboards or flashy ads, but whispers. The kind of reputation you build by being, not by begging. By month's end, I had 6 clients. And for the first time in my life, I was building something that had my name etched into its bones. I called it Solace and Thread, a consultancy for bespoke event curation, but also, in some ways, a reclamation. Each gathering I designed was more than decor. It was a small rebellion against the hollow extravagance I grew up around. I didn't want to impress. I wanted people to feel seen. When I told Roman, he smiled in that quiet way he had, pride tempered by awe. It's perfect, he said. And long overdue. I posted a simple launch message on a discreet social platform. Nothing flashy. Just, for the daughters who were told to shrink, this space is yours now. I see you. The comments poured in. Quiet voices. Familiar echoes. Women like me who'd lived in the margins. Who carried silence like a second skin. Who were ready to step out of the frame and into the light. Juliana didn't comment. Neither did my mother. But that was okay. Not every garden needs the same soil. It had been nearly 2 months since the incident at the jewelry store. Since the slap. Since the unraveling. And though I no longer felt the sting on my skin, I could still feel the echo of it in rooms that used to know me as Les. I was in the hallway of the Whitmore estate, passing the antique mirror that had belonged to Roman's grandmother, a tall, ornate piece framed in rosewood, slightly warped with age. For weeks I'd avoided it, unconsciously glancing away each time I passed. But that morning, something made me pause. There she was. The woman in the glass. My reflection. But not quite the version I remembered. She stood straighter now. Her shoulders didn't slump to make room for anyone else. Her eyes, once dim with careful diplomacy, held a steady fire. And then it hit me, I hadn't been invisible all those years. I'd simply been surrounded by people who refused to look. That day, Roman's mother called. Now, that was unexpected. We'd only met twice. Once at our wedding, her handshake cool, her smile trained. She had grown up in a different world, one where marriages were mergers and love was a negotiable clause. The second time had been brief, over brunch. She spent most of it discussing the state of the stock market and subtly suggesting I join a real foundation instead of dabbling in decorative ventures. So, when she requested tea, I braced for war behind polite smiles. She arrived in a beige trench and pearls that looked like they'd been born of royalty. But her expression was different. Less polished. More human. We sat in the drawing room, the tea tray between us like a truce. "I've been watching your work," she said, sipping chamomile. "This. Solace and thread." I raised a brow. "I didn't think it would be your taste." "It's not," she admitted. "But it is meaningful. I see what you're doing." I waited, cautious. She placed her cup down carefully. "I was never kind to you. I won't pretend otherwise." That caught me off guard. I saw someone who didn't play the game. And I mistook that for weakness. I said nothing. "Just let the silence stretch." She continued. "Roman has always been his own man. But I see now, he's happier. Calmer. Since you." That landed softer than I expected. A compliment wrapped in surrender. "I don't expect forgiveness," she added. "But I wanted you to know I see you." I looked at her then, really looked. And for a moment, I saw myself through her eyes. Not the girl from the sidelines, but a woman who had taken her pain and made art. Who had been called shadow and responded by becoming a lighthouse. "Thank you," I said simply. When she left, I stood at the window, watching her car disappear down the drive. Some ghosts don't need exorcising. Just acknowledgement. And maybe that's what healing really is, not waiting for everyone to say sorry, but choosing to live anyway. Fully. Without shame. Without apology. My birthday was approaching, a date I'd long treated like a paper cut. Not deep enough to scream, but persistent enough to sting. Growing up, Juliana's birthday was an orchestrated affair, princess themes, ponies once, even a live quartet by her 16th. Mine always seemed like an afterthought, tacked onto whatever weekend was left over. One year, they forgot entirely. So I stopped counting. But this year, Roman wouldn't allow me to forget. "You're not hiding," he declared as he stood in the kitchen with a stack of invitations. "We're celebrating. Not because you need it, but because you deserve it." I opened my mouth to protest, but he silenced me with a single raised brow and a kiss on my forehead. It would be an intimate gathering. Friends from my work, some of Roman's colleagues who had come to know me as more than the silent spouse. Even Cassie Hartwell planned to attend. But as the date drew near, I couldn't help but wonder, would Juliana come? I hadn't invited her. I hadn't not invited her either. Instead, I told the wind and let the possibility drift. On the night of the party, the house glowed with soft light. Strings of garden lanterns bobbed like fireflies. There was no glitter, no confetti, just warmth, linen-draped tables with handwritten menus, soft jazz playing from hidden speakers, and laughter that didn't feel forced. And then, just as dessert was being served, a lemon chiffon cake, my quiet favorite, I saw her. Juliana. Standing by the archway, her hair curled like she hadn't bothered to fight it for once. Her dress was simple. Not designer, not defensive. Just her. Our eyes met. She raised a small box and mouthed, "May I?" I nodded. She approached slowly, glancing around as if trying to understand the air. "This is beautiful," she said. "I didn't plan it," I replied. "But I curated it." A smile tugged at her lips. "Of course you did." She handed me the box. Inside was a necklace, simple gold, with a charm shaped like a key. "You always had the key, Liza," she said. "We just locked you out." I stared at it. Then at her. And I realized this wasn't an apology meant to fix everything. It wasn't a reset button. It was a gesture. A hand extended. I took the necklace and, for the first time in a long time, I hugged my sister. The room continued buzzing around us, glasses clinking, conversations blooming. But in that moment, I felt something shift inside me. A door unlatched. A room with no more shadows. Later that night, when most of the guests had gone, Roman pulled out a chair he'd kept hidden until now. It was handmade, carved from cherry wood, curved perfectly for my spine. "I had it built for you," he said, "for your studio." "Why?" I asked, running my fingers along the smooth grain. Because for years, you gave up your seat at the table, he said. Now, you get your own throne. I sat. And for once, it felt like I belonged exactly where I was. The morning after my birthday, I woke to sunlight spilling across the sheets like a promise. Roman was already gone, an early meeting, but he'd left a note on the pillow. There's nothing more powerful than a woman who finally knows she's allowed to take up space. Happy becoming. R. I smiled, tucking the note into the drawer beside my journal. It would live there with other small relics. A pressed petal from our garden, the receipt from my first solo event with Solace and Thread, and a photo of me at 7, wearing a crown made of foil and a smile that believed in magic. I had that smile again now, just quieter. Rooted. Later that day, I met Cassie at a local gallery cafe. She arrived in wide-legged pants and her usual aura of effortless command. I saw the photos from your birthday, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. You looked like a woman who stopped auditioning for roles she never wanted. I laughed. That's one way to put it. She sipped her espresso, then leaned in. I've got something. It's a little unconventional. But I think you're ready. It turned out to be a panel invitation, women who rewrote their names. A quiet stage, part of an arts and identity summit downtown. Small crowd. No big names. But real stories. She wanted me to speak. The thought made my palms sweat. I'm not public like that, I said, my voice catching. Cassie's eyes twinkled. Eliza, your whole life is a public act of quiet rebellion. Just speak the truth. The right people will hear it. That night, I sat in the garden with Roman, knees pulled to my chest, the invitation card in my lap. I'm scared, I admitted. Of what? He asked. That no one will care what I have to say. That I'll open my mouth, and it will sound like nothing. He took the card from me and turned it over slowly. You've spent most of your life whispering so others wouldn't feel small. Maybe it's time to raise your voice, not to shout, but to sing. So I said yes. I prepared for weeks. Practiced in front of mirrors. Rewrote sentences that sounded too polished, too cautious. Until what remained were just my bones, my truth. The day of the event, I stood backstage in soft navy, hands trembling. Then I looked into the mirror they'd placed in the green room. And I saw her again. Not the version they used to ignore. Not the shadow. Me. When it was my turn, I stepped up to the mic. And I began. The microphone hummed softly beneath my fingertips. I stood under the low light of the community auditorium stage, looking out over a sea of strangers. No velvet curtains. No spotlight. Just people waiting. I took a breath, and for a moment, I heard her. The voice of my past. Don't make this about you, Eliza. It was Mother's favorite incantation. A reminder that I was background noise in other people's anthems. But not today. Today, I was the song. My name is Eliza Monroe, I began, my voice steadier than I felt. And for most of my life, I lived like a whisper. A quiet girl in the corners of family portraits, never quite centered. The audience leaned in, not dramatically, but in that subtle way people do when they're hungry for something real. I was the kind of daughter who didn't cause trouble, who made room, who dimmed herself so others could shine brighter. My sister called me Shadow once. In a jewelry store. Right before she slapped me. A murmur rippled through the room. And that slap wasn't the worst part. The worst part was, for a long time, I believed I deserved it. Because I had spent my life believing that being loved meant being smaller. A woman in the front row covered her mouth with both hands. Another wiped tears. I pressed on. But then something changed. I met someone who didn't try to fix me, didn't tell me to speak louder or take up more space. He just listened. And in that silence, I began to hear my own voice again. I paused, scanning the room. And when I finally used it, when I stepped into the light they said I couldn't survive in, I didn't just find power. I found peace. Applause didn't erupt. It rose like a tide. Steady. Sure. Not because I had performed, but because I had testified. Afterward, people came up quietly. One by one. A teacher who had been passed over for promotion in favor of louder peers. A mother who hadn't spoken to her daughter in years. A teenage girl who whispered, "That's me. I'm the shadow, too." I hugged her tightly. "You're not," I said. You're the light they didn't understand. Later, as Roman drove us home, I stared out the window, the city lights slipping past like old names. You were extraordinary, he said, breaking the silence. I turned to him. I was just honest. Same thing, he replied. Back at home, I placed the program from the event beside my wedding photo on the mantle. And as I looked at the woman in both pictures, I realized something. They were finally the same person.